Now then, I do. Recently, I've been reorganising my workshop and planning some videos to shoot for later on. And whilst going through that process, I've realised that there's a few little things that I've done around the workshop that have made my life a lot easier and improved the flow of my workflow. So today's video is going to be talking about those, as well as a couple of other little things that might help you. So stick around for the rest of the video. Now, I don't know if you're all like me, but if you are, when you're in your workshop, one of the most frequent phrases that you're going to utter is, "For f***ing sake, where's my b***ing tape measure?" I am always losing tape measures, so I decided to do something about it. So the first tip is, wherever you are likely to need a tape measure, so for me, by my miter saw, by my plane thicknesser, by my workbench, put a tape measure there. I have mounted on the wall just some black webbing straps just screwed onto the wall, and I just took a tape measure on. So I've got one by my miter saw, one by the planer thicknesser, and one by my workbench. Additionally, I have a little mini tape measure on my apron, and I've also got a tape measure in my tool cabinet. And that means that now I have no excuses for losing tape measures. Now, I think that this is a really handy little tip. And to go along with it, another thing that I have done is by all of these machines, I've mounted ear defenders on the wall. So I've got a set of ear defenders by my miter saw, a set of ear defenders by the planer thicknesser, a set of ear defenders on my hollow chisel mortiser, and a set of ear defenders by my table saw. Now, in addition to that, one other thing that I've done, if I just spin you around, is by my table saw, I have mounted push sticks on the wall. So the tip is, whatever things that you're going to need regular access to near machines, make sure that those things are within easy reach near the machines, and have lots of them spread around in case you lose any. So the next tip is to think about your lighting in the workshop. Now, when I had this garage built and wired, I had daylight balanced LED light panels put in, and I made sure that they were spaced evenly around the workshop to give me a fairly even spread of light. Now, there are a couple of dark areas in the workshop, like out towards the garage door, but I'll come on to that in a minute. Now, for all the places where I spend a lot of time and I need to be able to see like detailed work, I make sure that I place those machines or the workbench underneath one of these lights, and it gives me a really nice even light that I can work with. But that's not always enough. So the next thing that I do is I use task lights. For example, this little LED panel, they were only about 10 or 15 quid or something from Screwfix. I don't use it all the time, but I've got it screwed to the wall there under the window. And when I need some extra light, I just plug it in. Now what this does, this light gives me a light at a really sort of steep incidence angle coming across the workpiece, which is fantastic when you're sanding or finishing or anything like that. It also helps when I'm cutting dovetails low down like this. If I want to cut dovetails higher, then I'll use a light mounted higher up. I haven't actually fitted one yet, but I have got a couple of spare, and there is one going up there. Now, in addition to that, I've also got lights around some of the other machines. So here at the bandsaw is another place where you quite often need a detailed task light, particularly if you're not using the fence, if you're cutting to like a curved line or something like that. Now luckily, this Charnwood comes with a movable task light, although the flexible arm isn't that good. But you can generally get it roughly into a position where you want it. Now this is only a small light, but it's more than enough for doing the work at the bandsaw. So I couldn't actually fit an LED panel above here because the garage door comes up over this area. Now when I'm cutting long lengths of wood, it doesn't really matter because I can open the garage door and I get plenty of natural light. However, in bad weather or when I'm cutting short wood and I don't want to open the garage door, I need a light over here. So just like the little task light that I've got over my workbench, above the bandsaw I've got one of those lights that points in this direction. So that light doesn't actually throw out that much light, but it is enough just to brighten this area enough to be able to see the lines properly, and that's all you really need with task lighting. So the next tip, this is a really obvious one, but I think people don't pay enough attention to it, and they'll generally think about it once and never think about it again. But it's to really think about your workflow in order to determine your workshop layout. So I'm going to just bob behind the camera so I can move the camera around and I'll have a talk about it. So my normal workflow is to cut rough boards to length, then either cut them to width and then plane and thickness them, or just go straight from cutting to length to planing and thicknessing them. So the first machine in the workshop is the miter saw. So I can bring boards straight in there and I can cut them to length with the door open. Then the next machine along is the planer thicknesser. However, if I need to cut them to rough width first, rather than cutting rough boards on a table saw, I've got the bandsaw directly across from the miter saw. So these three machines are effectively in a triangle but separated over the width of the workshop. So after planing and thicknessing, a lot of times the next step will be to cut to final dimensions, which is done here on the table saw, and my table saw is directly across from my planer thicknesser. Now after that I would normally go straight to my workbench and start cutting joinery. So at my workbench I have my tool cabinet directly behind the workbench, so all my hand tools are within easy reach, and then just in front of the workbench is my hollow chisel, mortiser and drill press and stuff like that, so that I don't have to walk too far to use these tools. And then across from my workbench in the back corner is the dust collector, and each machine is plumbed in using blast gates. And then I have a run over the top down to the planer thicknesser. And this means that I've always got dust collection on hand, but this is the most inconvenient machine in the shop to use because it's tucked away in a back corner, so to turn it on and off I have to literally walk the full length of the workshop. So unfortunately, like a lot of things in life, sometimes we have to compromise, and for me having the dust collector there is a bit of a compromise because, like I said, I've got to walk from one end of the workshop to the other if I want to turn it on whilst I'm up there. But in reality it's not that much of a compromise, given that it allows me to have a very smooth and seamless workflow with my machinery. So this garage is 22 feet long by 10 feet wide on the outside. It's less than that on the inside, obviously, because I've got it insulated. And that does mean that space is at a premium. Additionally, I normally store motorbikes in here as well as all these tools. So that's why I have everything laid out the way I've got it laid out. Firstly, for a smooth workflow, and secondly, to make space to store motorbikes. So this might not work for you, but I've arrived at this layout over a few years now of working in garages about this size and shape. So this is what works for me. For you, go and have a think about your machine layout and your tool layout to make life easier. The last thing that I want to talk about today is buying materials. Obviously there is a cost of living crisis going on and we're all feeling the pinch. Now, I'd always planned to insulate and line this garage out, and when I priced it out originally, when I first got the house, I think it was going to be something like £900 or thereabouts. As time went on and I then was actually ready to line this out, the cost of the materials had gone up from £900 to between £1,500 and £1,900 if you're going to buy your materials from like Wickes or B&Q or somewhere like that. So I had a look on the website of some local timber merchants, and one of them came back a fair bit cheaper at nearly £1,100 for the materials I wanted. As I was just about to pull the plug and buy them, I thought, well, let's give them a ring and see if they can work out a deal or anything like that. So I rang up my local timber merchant and I'll give them a shout out. It was Howarth Timber in Wakefield. They were brilliant. So what they did is they asked me what I wanted to use the materials for so they could make appropriate suggestions. That brought the price down a little bit, but also their in-store price was a lot cheaper than their online price for some reason. So the bill went from nearly £1,100 down to £625. Now, I think you'll agree that is a massive saving. And the one piece of advice I can give you is make sure you ring the timber merchant and have a chat with them, because you might be surprised, you might save yourself a fortune. Right, that's it for today. Just a little short video having a talk through some tips and stuff like that. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below, and if you're not already, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.